I'd like to welcome everyone to the December 2019 edition of the Cerini Nonprofit Connection. It's hard to believe we've been doing this for a year. We had our first one in December of last year, so it's crazy that it's been a year already. With the holidays upon us, I figured who better to have with us than Randi Dresner from the CEO of Island Harvest. Randi's an incredible leader within the nonprofit sector. So Randi, welcome.
Thanks. Thank you for being here. Appreciate it.
So before we get started, Randi, why don't you tell us a little bit about Island Harvest and what Island Harvest does, again, especially around the holiday season?
Sure. Island Harvest is a leading hunger relief organization on Long Island. We are close to 30 years that we were established. And our founding is an interesting story. It's where someone recognized that there was food being thrown away from a convenience store. And throwing away food distresses a lot of people because we know that
distresses me.
Yes, we know that there are people that are hungry. And so even 30 years ago, and so our founder went out and checked what kind of laws and regulations were available and what a process might be, and started Island Harvest, picking up tuna salad sandwiches from a 7-Eleven in Rockville Center. But from that experience grew Island Harvest, the largest hunger relief organization on Long Island. In time, she had lots of her friends and people in the community that she met that were interested in becoming involved. And probably about 3 years after she started with those chicken salad sandwiches when she founded the organization to make it an official 501c3 organization. There was a lot of generous support from Ed Travianti from TD Bank. Well, it wasn't TD Bank at the time. He was with EAB Bank. And he gave her structure. He actually gave the organization office space quite generously, and gave Island Harvest our first grant to buy a refrigerated vehicle so she didn't have to pick up food and deliver it out of a station wagon and a cooler in the back of her car. And so it was finding interesting partners and appropriate partners that really got us started. And partnerships are big with Island Harvest, so that's really been our legacy of working with other organizations. Now we're much different from that organization. Food rescue is what that's called. We still do it. It's an important part of our work. We call it our legacy program. And we're actually getting more and more involved in food rescue, or back more and more involved in food rescue. But we are a full-fledged food bank. We're helping about 300,000 people every year across Long Island.
That's incredible.
It is unbelievable. If you look at statistics with lots of organizations, very few touch that many lives. What we've also done is change the paradigm of the approach to ending hunger on Long Island. We're always going to be moving food and helping people by giving them food. And by the way, it's now a lot of different types of food products that we're distributing. But it's the cross-sector programs that we are creating, which help to target root causes of food insecurity, which I think make us a unique organization here on Long Island and elsewhere. Through some hard work we did with strategic planning, we're concentrating on nutrition, SNAP outreach, which is food stamps, and farming and fresh produce. And so those three things touch every one of our programs, cross-sector, in some way, shape, or form. And we're excited. There are lots of new programs that we're getting involved in, and we're really excited about the future of the work and our impact on people who are food insecure across Long Island.
Awesome. So the reason I asked you to come here today was to talk a little bit about board and board development and how you grew your board and all that stuff. But I can't have you in the room without talking to you about how you've been able to leverage your organization. I think you've done a tremendous job of taking a small amount of money and leveraging it into something so much bigger in terms of the organization through your networks, through your partnering, through everything that you do. You want to talk a little bit about
Sure.
that first before we kind of dive into the whole board concept piece?
Sure. Look, I think that it defines our organization, and I appreciate that you recognize that, and that we've talked about that before. It's not untypical in the food banking world to leverage relationships. We're one of those few food banks in the country that depend more on donated product than purchased product. So our model's a little different. And because of that model, we're accustomed to leveraging relationships. So 85% of our food is donated.
Wow.
And that means we have to be pretty creative with where we're sourcing our food. We get it locally here on Long Island and across the country. And some of that is through leveraged relationships. Look, we're not just moving brownies and candies and cookies anymore. In fact, we're almost never moving that kind of product. And in fact, water is a product we take in, but we're not sourcing it. We're not looking for it. It's just product that might come in.
So what is the stuff that you're sourcing and looking for, and how do you develop the?
So farm fresh products are important to us. And so we're working with farmers here on Long Island and across the state and even across the country where we could develop relationships. Sometimes it's through other food banks that help us with that. Sometimes it's through the Farm Bureau, whether it's the state or locally. And so leveraging relationships is important. Stewarding relationships is important. So it's what we can do to make it a true partnership. And I would say that is something that separates us from the crowd, if you will. When we meet with prospects, whether it's in funding or in food, our conversation is fairly similar. We're sitting around a table because both of us want something out of the relationship. And we set it straight right from the beginning. I'm okay about that. If you're sitting here because you've recognized that Island Harvest has a really good brand, and you want to be connected to the brand, I'm okay about that. Let's just be honest about it. And if you're looking to co-brand, I'm okay about that. If you have a good brand, a respectable brand, a respected brand, then I'm okay about that. But let's talk about it in the beginning of the relationship, because I don't want something hidden to come up later on. How come you didn't put our name here, there, or wherever? And so we establish that from the beginning, and we do it with all honesty.
Yeah, I think those partnerships are extremely important, and you're starting to see more and more. And I think your trends as you move forward into 2020 and beyond, you're going to need to have those types of partnerships, because with all of the cutbacks that are happening within government funding and everything else, if you can't develop those types of relationships, right, you're going to have a really tough time.
Yeah, there's no question about it. And the truth of the matter is that for too long, too many of my colleagues were running their organizations as whatever this means, but a nonprofit organization. We're a business. I have a bottom line, and it's the same as if I was running a corporation, a for-profit corporation. And we need to approach it that way. And relationships and partnerships should be dealt with the same way. And so they want something out of the relationship. So do we. And like maybe it's not just money, by the way. Yep. And so we talk about money. Money's important, but it's bigger than simply just funds that we're looking for.
Yeah. And I agree wholeheartedly. I mean, one of the things that we're seeing, like I said, when I talked about before, the government funding shrinking, and I think, as you said, some of the other organizations have relied so much on that government funding in the past that they haven't really done an effective job of building any of the partnerships. They didn't need to,
right? Because
the money was coming in, and they could rely on it, and it was steady and everything else. It's not steady anymore. I mean, there's a $6.1 billion deficit in the state budget. Right. That's got to be made up. The state has said they're going to pull back $1.8 million between now and March of next year.
Right.
So
it's coming from somewhere.
Yep.
And likely, by the way, a good part of it will come from the nonprofit sector, because it's one of those areas where government just believes that somehow the nonprofit sector will make do and figure out how to keep their programs running with less money. And the truth of the matter is that sometimes that's what hurts us the most, because we can do that and we do that. But it's really cutting off our legs in some cases. we shouldn't have nonprofit organizations that are unsure if they're going to make payroll from month to month. They're running important programs. They're running their business, and funders need to understand that they need to pay for administrative expenses. It costs money to run a business, whether you're a nonprofit or a profit. And I think the biggest problem in our field is that it's called a nonprofit. If we can only change that.
Tax exempt organization.
Yeah,
I say it all the time. Let's call it a tax exempt organization. Forget the nomenclature.
That's what we should do. But we need to do that broad spread. Let's start that. Okay?
I'm on it. So let's do a 360 degree, because if we can talk about this all day and we're never going to get into what we really are here to talk about. So one of the things that I see is there's this constant blurriness, I would say, between what the role of the executive director and executive staff are and the role of the board, and kind of how do you define what each one is responsible for. And I think that's one of the big issues that the sector finds, because sometimes you have a strong executive director and a weak board. Sometimes you have a weak executive director and a strong board.
Right.
And then they take on roles that maybe not be appropriate roles, but they take on roles. But when you have the right board and the right executive director, there needs to be that that marriage there. And so what do you see as the roles of each?
Look, a board of directors, if they're doing their fiduciary responsibility and they take it seriously, their role is to hire the CEO of the organization, to manage the day-to-day operations, manage the staff, and manage the budget that they've approved. The board's responsibility is oversight, their fiduciary responsibility, duty of service, duty of care, duty of loyalty.
Loyalty, obedience, and care,
that's important, but really understanding each other's role is important. Let me rephrase that. I know that the role between the CEO and the board chair is an ever-evolving role, and it's not always consistent, because things come up on both parties' side where there may be some discomfort with a decision that's made. And I think that what they really need to do is somehow learn how to keep moving forward and not having any of those particular issues and particular topics hold them back.
Do you in practice have regular meetings scheduled with your board chairman so that you could have that open communication on a regular basis?
Yes. We try to have a breakfast meeting at least twice a month, if possible. Sometimes it's just not possible to even get those two meetings in. Busy time of year. It's November. We're catching turkeys and stewing really quickly. It's complicated. So it's important to retain that communication. And I'll be honest, look, even knowing how important it is, sometimes I mess up and I miss a week or so. I try to stay in touch via email or a text or a phone, and just keep the board chair and certain other board members apprised of things that are going on. I have to keep tapping myself on the shoulder, even after all these years, because I'm busy doing what I'm doing. But I think just keeping that open communication and just sending the information so that they're aware of things. No one wants to get caught not knowing. I hate it, and I know my board chair hates it. And when we have a problem, it's because I missed that step. And so it's just a question of keeping that on the front burner all the time, making sure that I keep the right people apprised of the right information.
So what is the type of things that you talk about with your board chairman in these bi-monthly, semi-monthly, whatever it is, meetings?
Look, we have a strategic plan. I think it's important for the board chair to know that that we're on that strategic plan. It's a live document, and we're using it as a roadmap. I think it's important for the board chair to know about how the programs are running, if we're meeting our goals. So the discussion sort of ties into the budget. In our case, our goals are not just dollar numbers. We have goals we have a whole umbrella program that I call Impact Beyond Pounds. And that's everything that we do other than moving food. And so our SNAP outreach, our nutrition outreach, our workshops, a lot of our other programs are under that umbrella. And I want to keep our board chair apprised of those things, because that's included in our overall budget outside of the dollar numbers, because we have goals for the number of people we're helping. Uh, the success of our mobile food programs, for example, or nutrition outreach. And we want to make sure that we monitor those numbers and keep the board chair apprised of it. I like to let our board chair know about the work we're doing in Albany and in DC if we're doing anything at the federal level. And just general information about the organization.
I mean, I think that's important because, again, as you mentioned before, the board hires you to do a job. So the board needs to then monitor that you're doing the job effectively. And then at some point in time, the board is going to sit down. Hopefully, someone's going to sit down and give you a review and a raise. It's always nice to get rewarded. Mm-hmm. So how can someone do that if they don't have that interaction and know what you're accomplishing?
Yeah, absolutely. And look, I think being clear about some of the goals that are set for the organization really helps to set the table for that kind of a discussion. And just understanding where the organization, the staff, the senior team of the staff, what's their vision for that year? How did you create those goals and the budget? And then how are you maintaining that? Or are you finding that there are roadblocks along the way and some of the things need to be adjusted? That's all part of that discussion. It's important.
Okay, now one of the things you said you communicate with the board chairman and other board members. There's always also that whole flow of information. Who is it appropriate at the board level to be reaching out to the staff? Who should they be reaching out to? Should the board members or any board member who has a question reach out through you? Should it all go through the board chairman? I mean, how does that flow of communication happen?
Right.
Or should it happen between a board and an organization?
So it's interesting because depending on what kind of organization you have and what kind of a board you have, the interaction of the people would change. So for example, on our board, we have somebody who was in charge of the routing and the fleet of UPS. And that is why he became a member of our board, because of the expertise that he had. He's long retired, but he's very, very involved in the operations of our organization. And so that's a juggle of being kept up to date with the interaction that he has with staff, because he actually is involved in some of the training that we have with our truck drivers and with some of the other interaction that we have with some of our operations staff. And so it's really a lot of work on my part and my staff to make sure that I know what's going on, what does he know that I need to know, so if he comes to me and has some questions or asks me questions, that I could answer it and not be embarrassed about it. And then on the other side of it, we have board members that care about the work that we're doing. They are really dedicated to the work that we're doing. They may be on the audit committee or the finance committee or our insurance committee, whatever it may be. And so, yeah, they would have interaction with staff. I think it always works best if the CEO is aware of any interactions. I think it works best, and I need to stop saying I think, because it's really that I know. When staff is in touch with a board member, the CEO should be CC'd so that the CEO is aware of the interactions, can respond, and make some decisions on some of the discussion that's going on, because sometimes staff people are not looking at things from 10,000 feet. They're looking at it from their level and their angle. The board is looking at it from a high level, and they might not recognize that the answer that they're getting is because that staff person is looking at it from their silo. It's not that they're doing anything wrong. It's just that's what their world is. So it's another reason why a CEO needs to be engaged and involved in the discussion. So, it's always best if it goes through the CEO. It's not always possible. But somehow retaining that information, the connection is important.
Yeah, I agree. I think that has to be there because again, um, if I'm a staff member and I get a request from something from a board member, I may drop everything else I'm doing, and that may
Exactly.
not be the appropriate answer.
Right.
It may be that there's something that's more pressing that has to get done, and
Yeah.
if it goes through you, or at least you're aware of it, then
Yeah, I
you
can
know
help set the schedule.
yeah, and
Most staff people get nervous if a board member reaches out to them, and so you're spot on. They drop everything right away because they feel like, oh my gosh, that the board member's calling. I need to do that, and the board member may not even be thinking about that. Their intention might be just when you have a chance, but they don't say that.
the other thing is, we've seen instances with the organizations that we work with where a board member will reach out to a staff person on a regular basis and pepper them with questions. And all of a sudden, it becomes 10 to 15% of their job is to just keep this one board member in answers. And again, that's not the right thing too. I mean, how do you delicately, if that's even the right way to do it, or how do you just squash that so that everybody understands what their role is? And is that your job? Is that the chairman of the board's job? Whose job is that to kind of have those conversations?
So not to give you an answer, but to add to some of the complications, when a board member gets involved at the staff level, sometimes they're picking up things that they're misinterpreting because they're seeing interaction with other staff people, or they're hearing parts of a story or a situation, and they don't know the whole story or the true story. They're getting it from one particular person. It could be a disgruntled employee even. And then now that a board member has an opinion or a thought about something, they bring it up to other board members, then it takes on a life of its
A little
own.
knowledge is dangerous. Yeah.
It can be really dangerous. And so it's a balance. I've had conversations with board members to say, look, I would appreciate it if you stayed connected to staff through me. It would be helpful because I could help to facilitate the information. And I've had that conversation a number of times, and they typically respect that. Sometimes they forget. It's not intentional, usually, but it's important to be aware of that and to acknowledge the reasons why you're looking to funnel information a certain way. And look, again, let's go back to in the corporate world. Would the board or a shareholder from a corporation just reach out to a line person in a company to ask a question?
Company wouldn't allow it to happen.
Right.
They have shareholder relations just for that reason.
Right. And so again, we need to treat our organizations, our companies, like we're a corporation, because we really are. And it's respected in the for-profit sector, and should probably be respected in our sector as well.
So kind of along those lines, in terms of setting the parameters and making sure that board members know what's expected of them, what happens when a new board member comes into your organization? So now you got this new board member. How do you acclimatize that board member to your organization? What information do you give them? Mm-hmm. How do you get them so that they're up to speed as quickly as possible?
Yeah, we're actually going through an evolution of onboarding new members. And, in the past, somebody was interested in becoming a member of the board. Our simple requirement prior to becoming a board member was that you had been involved in some capacity with the organization. So you were on a committee, let's say.
Some organizations have a slightly lower standard. You have to have a pulse.
Yeah, right. Well, and that's where it gets dangerous. If we're desperate to bring on board members, it means that we're going to get whatever the result is of bringing in because you're desperate.
Yeah, I kind of laugh all the time that, you go to hire somebody, you go through a formal interview process and everything else to see if the person has the skill sets and is right for the job and right personality and everything else. And you hire a board and it's like someone says, hey, I want to be on your board. Sure. Here.
Yeah. I get phone calls on a very frequent basis. Random people call me up and say, I want to be on your board. I love your organization. I love what you do. What's your name? And it happens a lot. It happens a lot. So, one, knowing the organization, making sure that there is a match, that you really, everybody believes in the mission of Island Harvest. How can you not? Our mission is to end hunger and reduce food waste on Long Island. But it needs to be a little bit deeper than that. So that we need to make sure that there's a match there. We like to know that they've been involved in the organization in some way, shape, or form. So there's a history, and we've gotten to know each other. So we're at not the beginning part of a dating situation, but sort of a little bit further down the road. What we're looking at now is creating a buddy, a board member that's been around for a while, who will become the buddy of the new board member to help with the onboarding process. We ask that new board. It's funny because the most recent board member will proudly say at the board meeting, okay, great. Now you have to go to every single event and every single thing that happens, because now I'm not the last man in or the last person in. So, we do have a bit of a process. We give them a lot of information about the organization, but we're also now giving information from the Attorney General's Charities Bureau to give them some background on the duties that they're responsible for. And we have a binder that we give them with a little bit of the history of the organization, when our meetings are, the names of all the staff people and what their responsibilities are, information about our programs and our services. So we have some depth in that material that we give them as well.
Do you give them back minutes to read to kind of catch up to speed?
We've done that. It hasn't been a practice, but we've done that. Yeah.
How do you keep the lines of communication? I mean, we talked about the communication between you and the board, but how do you keep the lines of communication open between board members outside? Because I think what I see out there is that a lot of board members think that, once a board meeting is over, time stops.
Right.
And then a month or 2 months or quarter, however often you have your board meetings, all of a sudden time starts up again.
Oh, hi.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
It's like, I remember, and I'm just as guilty of it because we all have lives and we all have I don't want to say real jobs, but real jobs. So I would go a week before the next board meeting. So what was I supposed to do? Okay, let me get it done now.
Exactly.
But how do you keep that, I guess, the communication, the flow, the everything moving so that it really is a fluid process and not a, hey, high interest, ooh, low interest,
right.
Hey, high interest, low interest.
It's a heavy lift. It's a lot of work. That's all in the category of stewardship. And the stewardship, though, has to happen from my level, a little bit from my senior team, and also from the executive board as well, to make sure that we're stewarding all the board members. I remember a lot of years ago when I started to learn that some of our board members were having lunch, playing golf together, doing all sorts of things, and it changed the culture of the board. We actually had better board meetings because the board members knew each other in a different way than what you're saying, just sitting at the room and then leaving and then coming back.
So how do you foster that?
Well, one of the things that we started a long time ago, we kind of lost it a little bit, now we're getting it back again, is that we have a breakfast meeting or some other kind of a meeting with myself, with the board chair, and one individual board member. And we try to start it during the summer and then let it carry through a little bit in the fall, so that every board member has the opportunity to sit with me as the CEO and with our board chair. And that really starts the process of breaking down some of the unknowns. Because once the board chair is comfortable with everybody, the board chair helps to facilitate those kinds of relationships as well. I also try to stay in touch with everybody and send information about what I learn about board members. And so if we have board members that are a board member that's being honored, I send an email out to the whole board. Help me congratulate so-and-so. They're getting recognized. Here's some information about the event if you'd like to buy a ticket. And so we send information out about that, even if it's not that you would go to an event, but just that you understand or are aware of some of the things that happen in other board members' life cycles. That helps to keep everybody friendly with each other. So I guess it's little things like that.
What sort of results have you seen since you've re-implemented this breakfast meeting? What sort of results are you starting to see within your board? I mean, do you see a change in how the board operates, and what sort of change?
What we see is that all the board members that we've taken the time to meet with feel more comfortable being engaged because they feel a true sense that the board chair and the CEO care about what they have to say. Because when we're having breakfast, that's what we ask. Listen, you've been around for a long time. What do you think about our board meeting and the way the meetings are run? What do you think about some of the programs within the organization? You know, we ask a lot of questions and we're listening to what they have to say. We've changed things about our board meetings, for example, and the style of our meetings because of these kinds of breakfasts. And so we've found that board members become more engaged because they feel that people are listening.
Do you find that because you're asking them on a one-on-one basis instead of having them to speak up in front of a bunch of other people, you get more honest answers?
Yeah, it's intimidating when even if you're a leader within your own industry, when you sit in a room with 25, 30 people and it's a very formal room and it's a very formal process and procedures, not everybody's comfortable speaking their mind. But when you're sitting having a cup of coffee and a brownie or a Danish, things change a little bit. You know, you have a little stuff on you. You know, it lightens things up a little bit, and you give them a chance to talk about themselves. How's your family? Are you going away? How was your trip? Anything change in your company? Tell me about your industry. So we're engaging with them. We care, and we show them that we care. And I think people appreciate that.
Cool. Now, do you guys do any sort of board agreement? And what's your feeling on board agreements?
I feel pretty strongly about it. You know, I have been out of teaching for a long time now, but I taught for 25 years. And one of the things that I always spoke about in the class is to make the roles and responsibilities clear so that everybody understands what expectations are. Because if you bring on a board member, or quite frankly, if you bring on an honoree or a chair of an event, it's the same thing. If you don't make your expectations clear, then everybody's frustrated because as a staff person, if it's an event chairperson, you are saying they're not raising the money that we needed them to raise. The event is failing. And the same at a board level. They're not engaged the way we want board members to be. Well, maybe it's just because you didn't make that clear. And so we have a document that's actually called the Roles and Responsibilities of Board Members. And it outlines what our expectations are. I've never had somebody say, never mind. What they typically say is, thank you for sharing this. I care about the organization. Now I see what you want me to do. I could do that. Or they may say, you know what? I see what you need for us to do or for me to do. I'm so busy right now with my other responsibilities. But now that I know, can I come back at another time and become a member of your board? And so our roles and responsibilities ask, obviously, we have a minimum number of meetings we ask that they attend. So if we have 6 meetings a year, we ask them to attend whatever it is, 4 or 5 meetings. We ask them to participate in buying a ticket at least one fundraising event of the year. We ask them to attend a mission-related event every year, at least one. Because if they don't really see that mission-related work, they're not able to make decisions at the board level the same way. And we've seen that happen. You know, it's something, you just see something different and you feel something different when you've seen how we're distributing food and how people are so humble to take it. And you understand the fragile nature of the work that we do. It really helps when you're making decisions as a board member.
So there needs to be that connectivity to the mission, because people can read words, but without actually having that connectivity to the mission, it's a lot harder. Okay.
I think their engagement will be different when they're more connected to the mission. We also ask them to become an advocate or an ambassador of the organization. And to be an ambassador of the organization sort of takes probably 2 different roles or responsibilities. One is speak about Island Harvest Food Bank. When you're out with your clients or your colleagues, let them know that you're on the board of Island Harvest and this is what we do. And this is how we help people. That's being an ambassador of the organization. The other is advocate with us. There are some important laws and legislation that are important to the people that we're helping. We may ask that you help by sending a note out or making a phone call to your legislator. It's important to take that role. We're not asking you to take a position, Democrat, Republican, and we don't typically get involved in a lot of dicey issues. We like to stay vanilla, but we need to show legislators that our board is engaged and involved. And so that's part of what we ask. And we also ask under that section that you introduce us. We have lots of contacts in the community, but an introduction as a recommendation from somebody who's a board member goes a long way. We've gotten some very, very significant contributions to the organization because we've had a board member make that connection. They may already know us, they may already know me or some of our other team members, but when the connection happens from the board level, it usually results in a higher level of support.
Do you include your board members in the ask process, or is it they make the introductions and then you do the ask?
So it's really interesting because most people are not comfortable asking.
It's sales. I mean, that's really what it is. It's sales, and a lot of people aren't comfortable in sales.
And the truth of the matter is that that's what my job is. I'm being paid to ask. And so I can't be uncomfortable. And neither can my development team be uncomfortable. But a board member may not be comfortable. And look, I've had situations where a board member will make an ask, but it's not the level that we really should have been asking, or not the right time of year, because we know that if we ask at a different time of year, it will result in a better gift or stronger gift, whatever that might be.
Or it might be that the board member doesn't connect to the right program.
That has happened as well. And so involving staff is really important in the ask. So we do ask board members to do a give and a get.
I like the word you said. I like the way you said give and get. I like the end there.
There's always an and. It's never an or, because it's important. And so when we ask for the give and the get, what we've had these discussions at the board table, where our board chair will say, please ask Randi, talk to Randi about the people you'd like to approach, because they may already be on the list, and maybe then because you have a good relationship, it could facilitate a better gift or a better amount of support. And if you're uncomfortable about making the ask and you don't do it the right way, you could walk away without a gift, and then it might be a wasted opportunity for something. Look, we as staff people are not asking for something because it's personal to me, Randi Dresner. I'm asking for support because it's Island Harvest. I'm passionate about our organization.
You said 300,000 people?
Yeah.
There are 300,000 people that are relying upon that gift to make a difference in their lives.
And it will touch in some way, shape, or form those 300,000 people. I could convey that. My staff could convey that. There are a lot of board members that can convey it, but it's always good to do it together.
Okay. When you said that some facilitation and change has occurred at the board level in board meetings and everything else because of ideas that have come up through discussion with board members and everything, what are like a couple of the things, not necessarily that have come from board members, it could be from the organization, but what are a couple of things you've implemented at the board level or board meeting level that you go back and say, I don't know why we didn't do that from like day one that we were here?
I don't know. I have to really think about that. Let's talk about it. Give me an example. Help me. Maybe it'll spur something in my mind. I don't know.
Great. That was awesome. Thanks for throwing it right back at me. Thanks, Bob.
No, I'm a salesperson.
Well, I mean, again, just how a meeting gets handled or communication in between meetings. One of the things that I've seen out there is there's some software applications that allow board members and committee members to communicate through a system rather than having to go through emails. Because if I'm emailing, now I have to go find the email address of the people I want to communicate, having all of the governance documents in one portal where everything is maintained so that if I want to go back and look at something, I can go back and look to see if it's there. I mean, these are some of the things that we're starting to see that some of our boards are kind of putting together. And it's, these types of ways that we can use technology, in essence, to ensure that board members understand what their tasks are in between meetings, so that everything is posted there.
Right.
If you have committee structure, the committee minutes can get pushed up,
Right.
so
Right.
that everybody has access to all of the information.
So we're not the most sophisticated organization from a technology perspective. I think we're getting there, wherever the there is. Look, from a simple perspective, just having these meetings is sort of fills that bill a little bit. We stopped doing it for a while, and we recognized that that there was an importance in doing it. And we did say to ourselves, I don't know why we haven't been doing this again. At board meetings, having a parking lot, a board where we could park topics that come up that are not on the agenda, that kind of derail the original plan of the board meeting. It helps. It makes a big difference, because we've had situations in the past where we had a question come up about a topic completely different from what our agenda was. And an hour and a half later, we realized, oh my goodness, we still had all these things that needed to be discussed, and there's no more time to do them. I think that I use this expression a lot with my staff and sometimes with my board. Look, if we each tap each other on the shoulder a little bit and remind each other about things that we've talked about doing, changes that we see that are effective or not effective, partnership has to happen at a lot of levels with a company, with an organization. Partnership has to happen with people who are funding us or supporting us or giving us food, whatever that might be. But partnerships have to happen internally with the staff people and also with board members. We need to be supporting each other, helping each other, reminding each other of things that would help or progress the organization. And I think that helps to make sure that we're a good functioning organization.
So let's take it to the other side. If I've got an ineffective board member, what do I do? How do I get rid of them, and whose job is it? Is it your responsibility? Is the chairman's responsibility?
It's probably one of the most complicated things that come up. It's one thing if you have a staff person and you need to release the staff person. Well, there's a process. It's somewhat easier. But a board member, well, people say, wait, I'm a volunteer. How could you fire me? How could you tell me I can't do this work anymore? I'm a volunteer, and I think I have a lot to offer.
And I want to continue to volunteer.
Right. About a year ago, I was at an event and bumped into a former board member who was close to a founding board member of the organization. I haven't seen him in probably 10, 12 years. After we got through the hellos and all of those things, he said to me, I was really hurt about the way I left the organization. And I said, really? What happened? He said, well, I was just told that I wasn't needed anymore, and that was it. Now, of course, I could share with you, it could very well be his interpretation of what happened, but people are volunteering to be on the board. I think that it's important for us to be sensitive about the way we're asking somebody to leave. What I recommend and suggest to our board, it's really a responsibility of the board to excuse a board member. It could happen with the CEO there, but it should be a board member, it should be somebody of the executive committee, if not the board chair. And I think the best way to handle it is to say, look, I know you're so busy. You're doing so many things in the community, or your company is growing, or your family, whatever it may be. And we love having you involved, but we know you're so busy. Why don't you step off, give yourself a break, and let's stay in touch and see when you might be able to come back, and we'll see if it would be the right time for the organization. That seems to work when we're looking to excuse a board member, but it's probably one of the most complicated things to do and the hardest thing to do.
Well, you have to be able to also evaluate what's the evaluation method of determining whether someone is effective or ineffective? And again, I think that comes back to that board agreement. And I think that board
Right.
agreement helps to make that a little bit easier than.
Yeah. Look, sometimes a board member that doesn't come to every meeting still has a lot of value. They could very well be the board member that's introducing you to a lot of prospects, or has a lot of value for their knowledge with respect to the work of the organization. So I think that you're very right. It has to be evaluated appropriately. It's not just that it's on paper, black and white. Well, we said these 4 things and they're only doing 2 of them, so that means they have to go. It's a discussion.
Yeah, and do you move them then into something else like a committee
You
or
could
something?
potentially do that. Maybe they would go to an advisory committee or advisory board, or maybe they'd go on have some other role, maybe not as formal. It should be part of the equation.
Since we're running out of time, do you have any other parting thoughts that you want to share with anybody before we move on?
The nonprofit sector is an important sector on Long Island. I think probably there's nobody who knows that better than you. You have taken the lead on in so many areas with respect to things that happen in the nonprofit sector, whether it be offering your services, teaching, giving opportunities for people to learn about what's going on in the sector, facilitating relationships, whatever it might be. We need more of that. We need to be able to reach out broader. We are a wonderful island, 3 million people that are living here on Long Island, many, many companies, businesses, foundations that are founded and grounded here on Long Island. There are a select few that are engaged and actively involved. You would be one of them at the lead.
Appreciate that.
We need to have more.
And I think some of that's going to have to come from the nonprofit sector in terms of kind of being the liaison that kind of pulls that in.
You're not wrong. It could happen from a lot of different angles. But those that are not involved need to find a way to engage themselves, to care, to give back to the community where their employees, their businesses is grounded, because we all need to work together to make this the best place that it could possibly be.
Awesome. Thank you. Appreciate it. Thanks for spending time with us here today. Our next meeting is, or next,
whatever this is,
is on January 23rd, 2020. Wow, 2020. It's hard to realize we're in 2020 already. Our guest will be Robert Budd, the CEO of Free. We'll be discussing partnerships and mergers with the nonprofit sector. I want to thank everybody for tuning in. Have a happy and wonderful and joyous holiday season. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.